Hello and welcome to the Take Charge podcast. First of all, thank you to the New York Fire Department for that quite frankly frightening video. It's a reminder of just how important e-bike and battery safety is as we scale these technologies to electrify our future. It's alarming when you think about all the times you've been close to an e-bike, at a café, walking down the street, or sat in traffic, for example. Morin, the founder and CEO of Soteria, joins me to talk about all things battery and e-bike safety, highlighting some eye-opening figures from their recent research project and sharing pieces of the report that Soteria will release in early 2024. It's critical human-centric issues like this that are so important to discuss. So thank you, Brian, for taking charge. Hi, Brian. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be here.
Looking forward to talking all things safety. We were talking before about battery, energy density, and there's a lot of focus on that at the moment, but there is maybe a lack of focus on safety. So I'm interested to hear about your report that is set to be released sometime in the new year, early in the new year, and obviously your journey with Soteria and kind of how you came to be where you are today. So before we get into those details, talk us through your personal history and how you came to found Soteria.
Yeah, sure. So my background, I was raised in a small town in North Carolina, and I joke that there was 5,000 people there, and if you have a few minutes, I'll name them for you. But then I went to UNC and then Ohio State and studied physics. So bachelor, master's, PhD in physics. 10 years at big companies, first DuPont, and then Milliken, about a $5 billion textile company. Uh, Jumped ship and became an entrepreneur for the first time in 2004, working on a ballistic fiber for the military, and got that out. But in 2010, I moved into the battery industry with my second startup, and then the thing I didn't realize. I had a co-founder, and we developed a product which is part of our portfolio now for battery safety. But the idea was to contract manufacture it and then sell it directly to the battery manufacturers. And at that time, all of the battery manufacturers were in Asia. And the thing I didn't know was that large Asian companies don't want to buy a critical component from a small startup they've never heard of on the other side of the planet. So it led to a lot of frustration, culminating in kind of 2017 with the Samsung Galaxy Note 7. And there was a critical problem, and we had the solution, but I couldn't convince them to buy it from us. And I realized we needed to really pivot completely what we were doing. And so we changed completely the business model, added another technology, and really started to address safety in general. So rather than having one component we were trying to sell, we tried to understand battery safety in general. And that's when we started the consortium that I'm sure I'll get a chance to talk about. And decided, and really, when we founded Soteria, the question in our heads was, how many people are you willing to hurt to make more money? Hurt becomes not help. So how many people are you willing to not help to make more money? And the answer was not even one. And when that filtered its way through the business model, it became a completely different thing, right? So that's how kind of Soteria was started.
Very good. I was going to ask what sparked your passion for safety, but I guess identifying that and kind of going through that process is where you identified not just the opportunity, but also your passion for it.
Yeah, you hear about it, and people talk about safety, and you think about things catching fire. But when we started to run the tests, and especially run the tests on big batteries, the ferociousness with which the batteries catch fire is completely disarming.
Mm.
That you can go from everything being completely normal to an entire room being erupted in flames in kind of a 30-second time frame is something that, it just catches you. And then knowing that, there's a lot of reasons people aren't working on it, but knowing that nobody was really organizing the industry to work on it, I don't have to be the leader, but I cannot stand a leadership void. And so we just stepped into it, right? And in some cases it's messy, but a lot of people really appreciate what we're doing. So
Very good. Talk me through some of the safety statistics and where we stand today. I don't know if you have the statistics globally, but certainly for the USA and North America.
Yes, I can give kind of a high level sense. So for something like a cell phone, about 1 in 5 billion cell phones is going to spontaneously erupt in flames. It's rare. Don't be afraid of your cell phone. A cell phone battery is relatively small. If it catches fire, chuck it in the middle of the floor, dump a bucket of water on it, give it 5 minutes, and you're okay, right? As long as it doesn't ignite everything else. But it's going to be a fire that's kind of this big for a few minutes. Uh, as things get bigger, it's much different. So the challenge with e-bikes, and e-bikes is where we are now, where the biggest kind of centralization of the problem is. The problem with an e-bike is that it's both 100 times bigger, and it should be 100 times more likely to catch fire, but it's more like about 10,000 times more likely to catch fire. So they're catching fire about 100 times more frequently than they should. And so you end up with a hazard that's much higher, right? Hazard is the intensity times the probability. And so you have kind of 100 times 10,000, and that's like, a million times more dangerous than a cell phone. And so to give an example, about 1 in 1,000 e-bikes will catch fire each year. So New York City, we have 300,000 e-bikes in New York City. So you get 300,000 fires, and each one now is big enough to ignite a room very quickly. Uh, and so with that, you suddenly have call it 300 building fires in an urban area, and it's a crisis. And then you have the same thing repeating in London and San Francisco and San Diego and Chicago and Seoul and Shanghai and everywhere else around the world. And it's a challenge. And so that's it. And then I'll go to the kind of the other extreme, which is the large batteries, electric vehicles. They're much better designed. And so there, the probability of a fire there is still in the one in the many thousands or maybe tens of thousands, uh, because the batteries are so much bigger. But the batteries the fires are also much bigger. And so the challenge there is that there's not much time between ignition and conflagration, right? And so drive your truck into your F-150 into a tree now, with all the mechanical stuff, you have a decent chance of just walking away from it. Drive a EV into a tree, and if the battery catches fire and you're stuck, that's not good, right? And that's the challenge. But to be clear, the EV manufacturers have done a good job designing the batteries to be safe. They've also done a good job taking responsibility and having recalls when there are spontaneous fires. Basically, every manufacturer of EVs had a recall of some form at one point in their history. So the industry is being responsible. I don't want to overplay it. The industry is being responsible. However, and so my message is always, the fires are rare, but they are ferocious. And so we need to know how to deal with them when they're ferocious, how to minimize that. And in the cases where they're less rare than they should be, then we need to address that.
Yeah, eradicate as much risk as possible. And I remember when we last spoke, it's not necessarily about when they're in operation, it's just when they're kind of sat there as well. And with the e-bikes, you might put them in the lobby or bring them up to your apartment with you. It's not necessarily just them being sat out there on the street.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Is the e-bikes, people are bringing them into their apartments. There's one case where a man parked it in the entryway for a walk-up apartment, and it caught fire, and he wasn't able to get his whole family out. Right, and I know that's a sad story, but the problem is it caught fire, and the stairwell was immediately on fire. So there was no way out except the windows, and so he was able to get two of his children out, but two of his children he wasn't able to get out.
Wow.
So,
hence the passion for your work.
and I try to, whenever somebody passes away, I try to read the story and understand it, because understanding kind of how it happened and the situation and the timing and everything else, it helps me think through. One, it helps make it real and human, and then the other thing is it helps me think through what are the things that could be done within the battery, outside the battery, in the environment to help, even if it's just best practices, right? Publishing something for the e-bike owners so they know what to do, right? So kind of think about the whole problem different from just the what happens in a lab part of it, right? Spent a lot of time talking to the fire chiefs also.
Yeah. So where does the solution to this problem start then? Is it with individual engineers? Is it with the CTO, manufacturing, procurement, or is it an all-round effort?
So I think for the industry, and the industry is going to be facing this kind of forever because while we have a good team that's working on battery safety, there's also thousands of very good, very talented engineers and scientists who are working on energy density. So they're working on putting more energy into a smaller package. By its nature, that is more volatile and more likely to catch fire. So we've got I've got job security, right? This problem is going to be around as long as I'm going to be around. The solution, I'm going to say two things about it. The first is kind of how we interact as an industry. And that part of the solution is we just need to have a very open, honest, fact based dialogue around what's being done and what can be done and what the solution stack, the technical solution stack looks like. And then on the technical side, I think we need to recognize that just like the kind of mechanical safety that's in EVs today, where you've got, or not EVs, but mechanical safety in cars, where you've got seat belts and shoulder harnesses and airbags and anti-lock brakes and crumple zones and bumpers and radar and everything else to protect the people. In battery safety, it's going to look the same, and we're going to have materials on the inside that shut down the flow of energy. We're going to have materials wrapped around the battery that contain the energy and thermally insulate. We're going to have cooling systems. We're going to have sensors. We're going to have mechanical protection around the battery. And all of those are necessary. Nobody's got a silver bullet that's going to eliminate the need of the rest of them. And then just have a mature dialogue about how to apply them and in what situations, which ones are needed.
Hmm. You raise a good point there about engineers and scientists working on energy density. It's a big it's a big priority in the market right now. So what would be your best advice to an engineer or scientist who's focusing on energy density?
It is kind of what I just said, which is to be cognizant of the safety. And because of the energy density in the cell, you have to build more protection around it and have extra layers of safety. And the extra layers don't have to be expensive or heavy, right? So they can still achieve their goals, but they're going to have to be kind of belt and suspenders around the safety of that because of the energy density.
Hmm. Very good. Um, Talk me through this report. I understand you're putting something together very comprehensive, which is set to be released in the new year. So yeah, talk me through that. And am I right in thinking that you saw no correlation between price and safety as well?
Yeah. No, no. So I'll start with kind of what the issue was and then talk about what we did. So the issue was, okay, the battery fires in the field, and especially in New York, the fire department and the government's done a good job of just awareness and facts and data and some videos and just letting us see what's going on. And what happened is you had a lot of very well-meaning, very well-intentioned politicians who were trying to enact some kind of a solution, but in the complete absence of facts and data, right? So they were saying, oh, it's all this kind of batteries that are bad, or it's all that kind, or it's the people who do this that's causing it. But there was no real facts and data around it. So we looked, and I was like, look, nobody's addressing this, so we have to. And we set up a project where we've done four things now. We're finishing the last one now, but the first was to disassemble about 20 e-bike battery packs and just look at the differences in both quality and design of the manufacturer between packs that are sold with the batteries or with the bikes and packs that are made by third parties as replacement packs. And this is where your comment's right, that we saw no real correlation between the price of the pack. There were some very well designed, very well built, inexpensive packs, and there were some terribly designed and terribly built expensive packs. There's a few brands that are trustable, but most of the time there's so many e-bike manufacturers now that the brand doesn't have a lot of meaning, uh, and so it's sort of unpredictable. But we did find through that a list of probably 12 different things that are not being done consistently that could be done and would have a big impact on the safety of the bike. So that was the first part. The next thing, we wanted to understand the whole problem. So we polled and then interviewed e-bike riders to understand what are their practices, what are they buying, why are they buying it, where are they storing it, how many people are experiencing fires. We found that we polled 1,000 people and found that 20% of them had experienced an e-bike fire of some one form or another, which is astounding. There's no way it should be 20%. I don't care if they each have 50 batteries, it shouldn't be 20%. Uh, but that's the results of the poll. And then we, as part of that, we put some kits onto e-bikes that are measuring temperature, shock and vibration, humidity, and of course GPS, so we know where they're going, and we have a sense. We have some cameras also. We're getting a sense of what are the worst, how much abuse are these things experiencing, and what kind of abuse. Uh, and then the last piece is so we also polled some e-bike manufacturers to kind of, and interviewed some e-bike manufacturers to find out what practices they have. And then the last piece is the piece we're doing now, where we've acquired some used packs and are disassembling the used packs to see what's the wear on the cells first, so what's going on inside the cells, so we can test that, and then also what damage and abuse, what wear has shown up in the pack. So we have the same pack we have used. We also have new. We're going to do direct comparisons. Uh, and so from all this work, we're going to do two things. We're going to put together a comprehensive report, and that would be something that would be interesting for anybody in the industry, but also an e-bike manufacturer. And then we're also going to put together a list of best practices. Here's the things that we recommend everybody does. And then as a business, we're going to offer packs that are built according to those best practices. We're also going to share those with all the e-bike manufacturers, and they can share it with their battery producers. Our goal is to fix 100% of the problem, even if we only capture a few percent of the market ourselves. Right. So this is not something we're going to hold to ourselves and keep proprietary. This is something we're going to let the whole industry have access to. Uh, because look, nobody else needs to get caught in an upstairs apartment, right, with a fire downstairs.
Wow.
So
Yeah, I think the credibility around sharing that and not holding that and forcing people to work with you, of course on the back of that you would hope that that companies would partner with you because you're the pioneer in this, and you're doing this for the good of the industry. So hopefully that is the case, and we can appeal to those people. But no, I think that's a really good thing to be doing. Just to comment on the on your findings. First of all, the 1,000 users that you spoke with, and I think you said 20% had experienced fires. Was that on their own e-bike, or is that just witnessing other people's as well?
so here's the challenge. That was a poll, and we were expecting out of 1,000 people, we were hoping to see 10
Yeah.
that had experienced fire. So we didn't ask a bunch of follow-up questions in the poll. We just asked the question, have you experienced an e-bike fire? And we didn't ask the follow-up questions of, was it yours? Was it while you were riding? Was it while it was parked? Was it while it was charging? We just didn't ask. So that may be a follow-up poll that we do. But we didn't ask. You make the poll and with some expectation, and we got 20 times more respondents who had experienced one. That clearly we could have gotten some more information if we'd asked them a lot more questions. But
Yeah.
that's not the way we set up.
So
We goofed.
yeah, that's a huge number. Wow.
It was terrifying. Right.
I remember when you and I live in Barcelona, and there's e-bikes everywhere, e-scooters as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, as soon as you told me that, I stay clear of them now. But you then kind of reassured me that in Europe, that I think there's better quality packs in place.
Europe, the problem seems to be lower. In London, for sure, it's the same as it is here.
Okay.
And so I think it varies perhaps by country. But as we've studied the European market, it's got less of a problem, which says it's a solvable problem. Uh, and that's something I think we need to understand better. But yeah, Europe's better than it is here.
Very good. Um, I think you touched upon it before, but what would you want this report to achieve, and how quickly would you want this to make an impact?
Yeah. So I mean, there's a couple things. The first is, we want to portray this as a solvable problem, and then we want to put the solution in people's hands. And none of the things that we're going to recommend are heavy or expensive, so they're things that can be implemented on every pack. Uh, and that's our goal: is that within a couple of years, that every pack is made to these standards. We're going to set up a process where somebody uh, can build a pack to that standard, and then have we'll have a third party that'll audit the design, and if they do that, we'll let them say it was built to this standard, to give the consumers a way of making a choice, right? That they'll know, okay, here's a standard that somebody did a good job putting together, and we're going to get a lot of people to speak into that final standard. So within the Soteria consortium, we've got about 20 companies who've agreed to help us with this. Everybody from NASA to Polaris to Dow Chemical, they're going to help us, and so that standard is going to be somewhat comprehensive. Uh, but two things. One is to give the consumers a choice. You know, they can buy the one that's been built to a standard. They can buy the one that hasn't. And then the other is to put the solution into the hands of the people in the industry who can execute on it.
Very good. I know you didn't see any correlation between price and quality and safety, should I say. Did you see correlation in any other categories, maybe chemistries or anything like this?
So I have to take a little bit of a step. If we did see the very cheapest battery packs were consistently poor. So there's kind of battery, and it depends on the size and everything else, but the price range of kind of $400 to $800 is what a battery pack might cost. In that range, we saw no correlation at all. If you're buying something for $200 or $250, those were there were counterfeit cells. Those were pretty poorly put together, right? So they were consistently bad, and that's the kind of thing that you might get on Alibaba, right? But the others, there was no correlation at all. Uh, the other thing, and I hesitate to use brand names, but I'll use a couple. There's a couple of leaders in the industry: Bosch, Shimano, Yamaha. Those three all were well put together. They're well designed. They all have good engineers, and so I'd have some confidence in those three. I don't want to try to give a comprehensive list because we haven't done a set of comprehensive tests, but those are three that we had some confidence in. I can't differentiate between them, right? They're all good enough, right?
Yeah.
So all could be improved also. So we're going to recommend things to them that they're not doing, and hopefully they'll consider them.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you anticipate any negative side effects or downsides to the report? Do you think it'll have an impact on density, manufacturability, scalability?
So I don't, not on the performance of the bike. Uh, I expect some feedback from the industry of why are you making us do this, right? Uh, and so I expect some of that, but not on the performance of the bike. The bike performance should remain the same. This is things like making it waterproof, putting in a vent so that if water does get in, the water can evaporate out. So you don't just have water trapped inside, corroding the insides of the battery.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not expensive things. It's things like making sure you use automated welding so that all your welds are the same. You don't have weak ones that can pop off. Uh, so I expect some feedback from the industry of why are you making us do this? We're making a lot of money selling the cheap ones. Why do we have to change?
Mm.
But in the performance of the bike, there won't be any negative performance at all, and it might enhance the durability of the batteries just because you're taking better care of them thermally,
Mm.
right?
Very good. Why has no one done this before in terms of what you're doing here with the report and the research?
So here's this industry has popped out of nowhere, and right, it existed in Europe for a long time and grew kind of slowly in Europe, but in the U.S., I mean, COVID was let's get outside. And let me say a plug for e-bikes in general. E-bikes are wonderful. Every hill is downhill. If you're worn out after a 40-mile day biking, you can expect to go 70 or 80. You can just cover a lot more ground, see a lot more scenery, and still get the same exercise, but just do more in the same time period with the same, or go for longer. And so they're wonderful. I love them, right? I have a couple. Uh, and mine are not the expensive ones that I said are safe. I've bought whatever, right? And and I keep them in the garage. So,
Yeah.
uh, but I lost the question.
Um, yeah. So why has no one done this before?
Oh, yeah, no. So the industry in the US is kind of a cottage industry. There's 300 e-bike manufacturers in the US. And the ones I've talked to, the founders and the owners, they're passionate about their bike and their particular customer that they're targeting and the use case and the performance and the stiffness and the ride and the comfort. And they just want a box with some energy that they can trust. And so they call up one of the guys who makes all the e-bike batteries, there's a dozen or so companies that do, most of them Asian, most of them Chinese or Taiwanese. And they say, can I have one that looks like this? And they work with them and get one. And that company tells them that it's safe and they would never compromise safety and they'll do everything they can for safety. And then they sell them something that's not designed safe. And these guys are just trusting their supplier because they don't have any battery experts. They don't have a list to go by. Right? I'm thinking that once they have the list, they'll be like, okay, do you guys do this? No, we don't. Do you do this? No, we don't. Do you do this? No, we don't. Well, how do I get you to do those things? And once 5 or 6 customers asks these 12 or so battery manufacturers to start doing that, they'll start doing it. And then suddenly, right, there's only a dozen or so of these guys. That suddenly all the battery bikes or the battery packs will be made that way. And I say suddenly. That suddenly is probably a 2 or 3 year period. But then the problem gets fixed, right? And eventually the government might step in and mandate. But I'm a free market capitalist, so I think the government, when they do something like that, it's usually too late. So I don't want to tell them not to do it. Please do it, but but I think the industry can work on this themselves also.
Yeah, yeah. This is more of a selfish question from my perspective. Well, of course, we've been talking about e-bikes. Is there any correlation with e-scooters? The ones that you stand on and see them in many major cities these days.
Yeah. So and this kind of all goes in the same category. Everything from a scooter up to kind of small motorcycles. Right? Anything in that category is all. I don't. They're not all the same because the battery packs can vary quite a bit. Uh, but the kind of and there's kind of a general thing in the industry which is not related to things with wheels on them, but really is related to we're taking cords and motors out of everything right now. And the companies that are doing that, they're very innovative. They're right. They're being entrepreneurial and putting out new products, but they're not battery experts for the most part. And so they're just slapping together some batteries so they can make their device. And it's everything from, you know, I saw a snowmobile bicycle had 2 skis or a ski in front and a tread in the back, and it looks like you sit on it like a bicycle, so it's not got 2 side by side, just one. Looked like a lot of fun, but my guess is nobody on that knew is enough of a battery expert to have thought deeply about the safety.
Mm.
Uh, and so you've got just 1,000 different devices that are coming out. And so bikes and scooters are the ones that are there now, but there will be, once we fix that, there'll be others,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Segways, that included?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Same thing. Well, the Segway 9bot is a more sophisticated company.
Mm-hmm.
So the stand-on scooters that I own are 9bots, and I trust them. I've worn the batteries out a couple times, replaced the batteries with their batteries, not third parties.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I have them all. I have 4 scooters and 2 e-bikes and a big stack of power tools all in my garage. And it's not the only way out of the house.
Yeah, you've got an emergency exit just in case.
Yeah, that's right. I got front and back.
Yeah,
That's important.
good stuff.
Right?
Well, that's I love e-scooters, and since I've moved here, I don't have a car. I sold my car back in England, and my big temptation was to get an e-scooter. But at the moment, I'm enjoying getting my steps in. But that's next on my list for sure. So it's good to know. And I'm hoping in the new year, once the research comes in, obviously your report is released, I'll be able to get an even safer one. Who knows? In terms of your well, let's talk a little bit about Soteria and your journey with them. So, talk us through your solutions right now. I know the report is very selfless, but talk me through your solution and what you can provide to customers.
Yeah, sure. So always 2 things to know about Soteria. The first is that we have a technology that gets built into the battery when it's made that dramatically reduces the probability of a fire if that fire would come from damage or abuse or a manufacturing defect. So this is something, it's not something you can put on the battery or that a consumer can buy. It has to be built in the battery. But the batteries that are built with our technology, the probability of a fire is reduced by about 90%. So about 10% of the battery fires would still remain. And then the second thing is that we believe safety belongs to everybody. So we're taking this to market through a broad-based licensing business model supported by an industry-wide consortium that we founded and that we run. So the consortium now has about 125 companies in it. NASA, Bosch, Motorola, Jaguar Land Rover, Mercedes, Daimler Trucks. Rimac is a nice $2 million supercar in Europe.
Yeah.
Lenovo, many others. And we, in general, work together to understand battery safety, to take the technologies that work and make them and help them, get out into the market. And the beauty of how we work is that it's very transparent. We have events every month online and 3 times a year in person where companies are presenting to other companies the work they've done on battery safety. And then everybody has access to test and kind of double check what's been said, so that it's a very transparent, kind of data driven community. And so through that, one, I get to hear a lot of both solutions and problems, and so we get to understand things kind of at a deep level. But then we also, right, the best solutions find their way; they float to the top. So,
Very good.
it's a little bit of an experiment on the business model, but it's been just wonderful in terms of how it's working out as a community to address safety. Which, if the industry gets safer, everybody benefits from that.
Yeah, very good. And what does the next few years have in store for Soteria? What's the plan?
Yeah, so we're doing kind of 2 things. The first is, and I mentioned this, we license our technology out, but we also have started a hardware division. We purchased another company that makes small battery packs, so the size of e-bikes and e-scooters, anything from kind of a laptop up to a forklift, right, or a golf cart. And so we're implementing our safety technology into those battery packs and offering them to the market. And then also, as part of this, we're understanding how those battery packs are built, what's the best way to implement safety in different ways. And all of our knowledge goes into what we're calling our patent pool, but it's our intellectual property pool that anybody has access to for a very small license fee. So our target license fee in large volumes is going to be 1% of the cost of the battery pack. So if you have a $2,000 e-bike and it's got a $600 pack on it, we're going to get $6, right? And that just seems fair. It ended up being a couple $100 or $100 or so for an EV. Again, it seems fair, right? So we want to make safety technology available to everybody.
Amazing. I'm fascinated to read the report when it comes out, and I've got no doubt it's going to provide huge value to the market, to the industry, and it's super critical work. So well done to you and the team to put all this together. This podcast will be released early December, and I think the report is going to be released maybe towards the middle of Q1, I think. So
Yeah.
what we'll do is kind of reshare the podcast with a link to the report, perhaps. But just for the people listening, where will the report be available once it's ready?
Yeah, so you'll be able to find it very easily on the front page of Soteria's website. So it's www.soteria.com. And the big is Battery Innovation Group. So soteriabig.com, and we'll make sure it's available from the front page there.
Very good. Yeah, we'll put a link to the site as well in the comments. As a closing tradition, Brian, how do you think the battery world will look in 10 years? Are we in the right industry?
So we are in the right industry. 10 years from now, pretty much everything that has a cord on it won't have a cord on it. And the battery industry as a whole, I mean, 10 years from now, it's going to be at least 10 times the size it is now. But then the other thing I think is going to happen is uh, the there's a lot of things. There's a lot of, I'll say, variation in design now that's going to centralize on some best practices, which will make safety better, right? And I think it's going to happen a lot faster in the battery industry than it did in kind of the original automotive industry, just because communication is so much faster this century than it was last century.
Mm.
So I think we're going to settle in on some best practices relatively quickly, and be able to use all of our devices with a lot of confidence.
Amazing. A previous show, we talked about how the industry needs to become more human-centric, and that was from a safety perspective. So it was actually an EV truck called Tello trucks, and how EV trucks have become huge, or trucks in general have become huge across the states, and how the industry will become more human-centric with being smaller and safer and less deaths associated to the things that we're building. Certainly the batteries that are going into EVs and basically everything these days. As you say, it's super important that we hold safety as the number one. So it's been a fascinating conversation. Really interested in talking to you today. Good luck getting the final pieces of the report together, and yeah, good luck for the launch early next year.
Yeah, great. Thank you. It's been a pleasure being here. And hopefully we'll put my contact information into the comments also, so anybody can reach out to me directly.
100%, of course.
Great.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Cheers.